how do you approach your wife when there is conflict?
One of the things you have to understand about women is you have to listen to them. Women are more sensitive to negative emotion than men, on average. Women are more agreeable. That would be part of the maternal dimension of their personality, and they're more sensitive to negative emotion. So they're threat detection systems. And so a woman will bring you her concerns. Now, because she's sensitive to threat, she produces a fair number of false positives, right? So she's concerned about things that maybe it's not necessary to be concerned about, but she'll be concerned about them before you are. So women initiate about 75% of divorces, for example. And you might say, well, that means women are primarily troublesome within a relationship. It's like, well, possibly. It's also possible that they pick up what's wrong in a relationship before men do on average, because women have to care for infants. That's why they're more sensitive to threat. That's not the only reason. They're also more sexually vulnerable. They're more physically vulnerable. It makes perfect sense that they'd be more sensitive to negative emotion. And that means that in a relationship, they serve the function of threat alert. And so a woman will be concerned about something and she'll bring her concerns to her husband and he'll try to solve the problem right away. But that's not helpful because she doesn't know what the problem is necessarily. So she has to wander around and talk about all the things that might be a problem. And if you let her do that, she'll dispense with most of that. And then you can kind of zero in on what the problem might be. Like if you let the discussion unfold to that degree, then you can potentially offer a solution. But you can't do that too early. You learn this in therapy too. Like when people come to lay out their life to you, you might even know what they should do, but you can't tell them. First of all, they won't listen. Second, they're annoyed if you tell them because they need to figure it out. You can't steal someone's destiny from them. You know, if you solve all your children's problems for them, well, you might think, well, they have no problems. It's like, yeah, they have a problem. They don't know how to solve their own problems. That's a big problem. And so you got to back the hell off. And it's frustrating for men often to participate in that more feminine mode of approaching the world. But if you understand that a woman who's more sensitive to trouble will detect things early and that her discussion of those things that upsets her will clarify problems, maybe even before they arise, then you can understand that it's useful. I mean, I still have to, even after years of practicing this with Tammy, I still have to stifle my proclivity to leap to the solution. You want to solve the right problem, man. So you got to listen. And my experience as a therapist indicated to me that in the typical marriage, people need to spend at least 90 minutes a week talking to each other just about their lives, just about the domestic economy, about their kids, about their relationship, just to keep everything up to date. And it's very difficult to have any true intimacy if that isn't allowed for. You might find that frustrating that you have to spend that much time attending to your domestic landscape, let's say, but it's better to do that on a regular basis than to do it in divorce court while you're paying your lawyers, $500 an hour and having a custody battle for your kids for 10 years, which is not a fate that I would recommend for anyone who wants to have a happy life. So it's also the case that it's very difficult to engage in any romantic adventure with your wife if there's things between you. It's very hard because that's a form of play, that romantic adventure. And play is a very fragile psychophysiological state. If there's anything between you that hasn't been sorted out, you can't play.
I mean, 90 minutes a week sounds like nothing.
Hey man, if it keeps your marriage together, it's a pretty decent investment. I would say that's a minimum. Then that would be 90 minutes a week that's specifically devoted to your marriage and family as a business, let's say, practical affairs. Practical affairs. May take longer than that, depends on how much disarray there is in your life. But if you start hoping that it's going to be less than that, well, you drift apart too. You have to weave your stories together like a rope across your life. You have to know what your wife is up to and what she's thinking and vice versa. You have to be on board with your interpretation of the past and the present and also your aims in the future, and that's constant negotiation. See, in our culture, we have this idiot idea that your identity is whatever you say it is. I mean, it's unbelievably immature and narcissistic. In a marriage, your identity is almost never what you say it is. You're negotiating who you are with your wife all the time, and vice versa. And with your kids, for that matter. If you're a civilized human being, your identity is a negotiation. People think, I just gotta be me. It's like, I don't want to be around you if that's what you're like. I don't mean that you should be a pushover only for the pleasure of other people. That's not helpful. But being mature means negotiating your identity constantly. That keeps you alert and alive too. And I spoke with a very wise man here, Tor Nortranders, just a week ago, and he said something interesting. He said that he could see all women in his wife. And I thought, how the hell do you figure that out? That's a rare thing to understand. He's a very wise person. And if you communicate, then you have all that in your relationship. You can let all that make itself manifest. If you do that, don't box up your wife. What is it? Peter, pumpkin eater, put his wife in a pumpkin shell, and there he kept her very well. What does that mean? Well, that's what people do to each other. They put each other in a box. They don't let their partner or themselves out of that box, and then they get bored. Well, if you communicate with your partner and you facilitate their development, then they continually reveal new parts of themselves, and then your relationship stays dynamic and alive. And that's a good deal.
Do you think people realize they put their partners in a box?
You can get to a very bad place one idiot step at a time. So do you realize it? You realize what you're doing at each micro step. You may be completely ignorant of the total consequence of that. If you want to build a pathological personality, you do that one lie at a time. And you might say, well, is someone with a pathological personality conscious of their pathology? And the answer is no, it's habitual by that point. But they were conscious at each decision step.